It was a regular Saturday morning when I first noticed her. Debra, the kind of woman who always had something to complain about. My name's Marcus, by the way. I'm a black man in my mid-30s, and I've been living in this neighborhood for about 5 years. My house is on the outskirts of town, a little more isolated than most of the properties here. I like it that way. I don't want to deal with the constant buzz of city life or, more specifically, nosy neighbors. It's peaceful. That's why I put up the electric fence last year. Now, don't get me wrong. This wasn't some huge, gaudy fortress. It was just a simple setup to keep my property secure. I had a few break-ins in the past, and the fence was just a way of making sure my dogs and I were left alone. That fence, it wasn't going to harm anyone unless they were trying to trespass. Simple as that. But Debra, well, she didn't see it that way. She had just moved into a house across the street, at least. I thought she did. No one had really warned me about her, and I didn't think much of it. The houses here are spread out, so I rarely even spoke to the people on the street. But it didn't take long for her to start making her presence known. The first time I noticed her, she was standing on her porch, glaring at my property. I didn't think much of it. Maybe she just didn't like the look of my fence, or maybe she was one of those people who thought their opinion mattered more than anyone else's. Either way, I carried on with my day, tending to my garden, playing with my dogs, enjoying the calm that came with the weekend. But then it happened. I was inside making myself some breakfast when I heard the telltale sound of a siren. My stomach dropped. Who the hell called the cops? I looked out the window, and sure enough, there was a police car slowly pulling up to my driveway. A second one followed, and I felt a sense of dread settle in my chest. As I walked toward the door to meet them, I could see Debra standing at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, a smug look on her face. I opened the door, and before I could even ask what was going on, one of the officers stepped forward. "Are you Marcus?" she asked, looking me up and down. I could feel her eyes narrowing as she took in my appearance, the casual clothes, the way I carried myself. A lot of people looked at me and assumed I was trouble. It's a stereotype that's hard to shake. I am. "What's going on?" I replied, trying to stay calm. A second officer, a man, spoke up. "We received a call about a potential danger. Someone reported an electric fence that could pose a risk to the community." I raised an eyebrow. An electric fence? That's absurd. It's just a fence. It's designed to keep my property secure. It's not hurting anyone. Debra then stepped forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's a public safety hazard," she said, her tone sharp and judgmental. "And you're breaking the law by having it up without proper notifications to the neighborhood. What if a child got electrocuted? You're irresponsible, and you need to take it down." I felt a wave of anger flood over me. The fence was completely legal, and it wasn't hurting anyone. Yet, here she was, a stranger, claiming it was a danger to the neighborhood. I could feel my blood pressure rising as I looked at her smug expression. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice level, "there are no children around here, and the fence is on my property. It's completely safe, and it's not your concern. Maybe you should mind your own business." But Debra wasn't done. Oh no. She just had to have the last word. "I'm calling the city council. I'm going to make sure they do something about this. You're a danger to the community, and I won't let you get away with it." The officers exchanged a look, clearly unsure of what to do. One of them, a younger guy, sighed. "Ma'am, unless you have more to go on than a hunch, there's nothing we can do. We can't just take someone's fence down because one neighbor doesn't like it." I could see Debra getting more frustrated, but she wasn't the type to back down. "I'm going to report this to the HOA. This is an unacceptable safety hazard." The officers gave one last look at me, shrugged, and turned to leave. As they did, Debra's voice rang out behind me. "I'll make sure you regret this. You'll be sorry you didn't listen to me." That was it. I thought that was the end of it, but I should have known better. Debra wasn't the type to just let things go. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from the HOA, and it was a formal complaint, saying that I needed to remove the electric fence or face fines and potential legal action. The letter claimed that the fence was a safety hazard and violated HOA guidelines, which was complete nonsense. I knew what this was. Debra had taken her little crusade to the next level. I could feel my anger bubbling up again. This wasn't just about a fence anymore. This was about Debra thinking she could bulldoze my life and make decisions for me. She didn't care about the fence, not really. She cared about making sure I knew my place, that I wasn't allowed to live peacefully without her interference. I knew I had to do something that would show Debra that messing with me wasn't a good idea. I started researching HOA laws, zoning regulations, and everything I could about fences and neighborhood ordinances. It didn't take long to find a loophole. See, Debra had no idea that my property was in a special zone where electric fences were not only allowed but encouraged. I had every right to have that fence, and there was nothing she or the HOI could do about it. But that wasn't enough for me. I needed to make her pay. I needed to show Debra that karma was real and it could come for her when she least expected it. I decided to take the issue up with the city council. I wrote up a formal complaint about Debra, detailing how she had been harassing me and attempting to bulldoze my property with her false complaint. I sent it off, along with evidence of her discriminatory behavior, how she had tried to run me out of the neighborhood, and how she had made racist remarks about me when I first moved in. It wasn't long before I got a call from the council. They were investigating the matter, and, as it turned out, Debra wasn't just a nuisance to me. She had a long history of causing problems with the HOA and other neighbors. Her complaints had led to several fines and legal disputes in the past. But the best part? Debra had never bothered to properly register her complaint. She had simply assumed she could get away with it, thinking she could intimidate me into removing the fence without any real consequences. When the council found out about her track record, they hit her with a hefty fine for violating city ordinances about harassment and misuse of the HOA system. They also mandated that she attend a series of diversity and sensitivity training sessions. To top it off, her property value took a hit, as no one wanted to deal with a woman who had a reputation for being a troublemaker. And just when I thought it couldn't get any better, I heard that Debra had tried to sell her house, only for potential buyers to back out because of the mess she had caused. In the end, Debra was forced to sell at a fraction of what it was worth. She was left with a bitter taste in her mouth, and no one to blame but herself. Karma had come for her in full force, and I couldn't help but smile. As time passed, things settled down in the neighborhood. The tension from the Debra incident slowly faded, and life returned to normal. My electric fence stayed up, and I made sure to keep it well maintained, a reminder that I wasn't someone who would let themselves be pushed around. Debra, on the other hand, found herself slowly fading from the neighborhood's collective memory. The shame of her failed attempts to bulldoze my life and the social punishment she received for her racist behavior left a permanent scar on her reputation. Over the next few months, I focused on improving my property. I added a small garden out front, planted flowers, and took extra care to make the place as welcoming as I could. It felt good to invest in something positive, something that would stand in contrast to the negativity Debra tried to bring into my life. As for Debra, her life took a different turn. The HLA complaints, the diversity training, the failed attempts to sell her house, all of it added up. The buyers she had hoped for never came, and her social circle shrank. In the end, she was forced to move to a different town, one where people didn't know her history. It wasn't a glamorous new beginning. It was more like a retreat into obscurity. She never had the courage to return to our neighborhood, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet satisfaction whenever I drove past her old house, now abandoned and left to gather dust. For me, I continued to live in peace, taking pride in the fact that I had stood up for myself. I knew that I wasn't just protecting my property, but asserting my right to exist without fear of being targeted for something as trivial as offense. The lesson, I suppose, is simple. Sometimes, doing the right thing doesn't just protect you. It can send the strongest message to those who think they can walk all over you.